Haitian lives matter. I cannot hear you. I cannot hear you. Haitian lives matter. Haitian lives matter. Matter. Haitian lives. Haitian lives. Pregnant women who are being hospitalized or who are dying right now because of what they went through. Children who do not know where their parents are because they lost them through the journey. So today is a call to action for all of you here to be an ambassador.
Our brothers and sisters are counting on us to really be the voice for them. They cannot be here. They cannot speak for themselves. We have to be the voice. So my goal is to connect with all organizations throughout the US so that everywhere you go, we have the headlines about Haitians at the border being deported unjustly.
It wasn't just about preventing entry, it was perpetrating humiliating practices pursued by horses, people using whip, and that triggers also all kind of reminiscences about, right, slavery. Now, what needs to be changed, given what we saw? The treatment they received at Del Rio, it says something that's more at the core of what certain people believe. They believe that the Haitian asylum seekers are not entitled to stay in the US because they are who they are, and that's an expression of racism. Parents who talk to their kids about others contribute to change perceptions about Haitians or about immigrants. And I continue to say the proper teaching of history, social science in school will also contribute to change things.
Thank you for that, and thank you all for joining us on this Haitian Times monthly conversation for the month of October. My name is McElvey Neal. I'm your moderator, and I serve as the managing editor at the Haitian Times as well.
As a forensic pathologist, what stood out to you?
I'm hearing feedback from a couple.
When I respond to the crime scene, the family is not allowed. No external people are allowed other than the investigator. So that was awesome. But in this case, I do believe that
some of your friends are using your panel link to join. So I'm gonna have to just hide them, unfortunately, and I hope that's not too disturbing for everyone else. We apologize for that. We are waiting. We do have a couple other panelists. So when they come in, I'll go ahead and introduce them.
Thank you very much, Andrew McCabe, as usual. Thanks to you. Just ahead, we're counting down to see.
If you're not a panelist, can you please go on mute? Thank you. All right. Also, okay, everyone's on mute, and we'll just wait for the other panelists to come on. So right now we're in October. It's been about a month since we saw what happened at the US-Mexico border in Texas with our Haitian brothers and sisters. Specifically, about 15,000 arrived at the border and made an impromptu encampment underneath a bridge in that border town. And over the week and a half or so that they lived in this encampment, and the entire world was watching what was happening while we were waiting for immigration, US immigration, to respond and clear the camp, we saw some abuses, some mistreatment that really hit at the core of many Haitians. At the Haitian Times, as we covered this crisis, we had a lot of people write to us, email and call, both just our regular audience and personal friends who felt just some very visceral reactions to what they were seeing, especially with the images of the Border Patrol agents on horseback trying to round up these Haitian compatriots trying to come in. And so we wanted to have this discussion today because the question we kept getting was, I want to do something, what can I do? Both from Haitian Americans and people who are not Haitian who wanted to support, there was just this level of just heightened sensitivity to what was being shown, even though we know these abuses have been going on for some time and they're not new. I guess being able to see them on the big screen like this or on news all the time really hit at the core for a lot of people. So today we'll get some perspective from our panelists. We have some of them here who are community organizers, activists, who've been on the ground for a long time, fighting the good fight when it comes to Haitian American rights, immigrant rights, civil rights in general for all types of people, to just give us some context as to what we were saying. And the second takeaway from today that we'd like to leave you with is to answer the question of what you can do. For many of you who called or asked or emailed or commented on social to ask what you could do, we're hoping that you can walk away today with some ideas of what makes sense for you based on where you are, your means, just whatever you can do to help these folks who are now being released across the United States and living in different cities, and even some of those who've also been deported or repatriated back to Haiti. I'll start with introducing our panel that I can see on my screen. Forgive us for the ones who are having technical difficulties. When they come on, I will introduce them. But first, you should be able to see Mr. James Pierre and Mr. Jocelyn McCalla. I'll start with James Pierre first because he is the founder of Houston Haitians United, or HHU. It's a nonprofit organization that was formed a few years ago as a civic association to bring together Haitian Americans living in the Houston area. HHU was really prominent in helping the Haitians who arrived at the border to connect with some of their family and friends, to help them find shelter, and to otherwise just lend a hand. So I'd like to start with James to see if he can take us through what, first of all, he experiences as someone living in Houston, where these types of migrations happen frequently, and how he even got connected and HHU got involved as a civic organization in doing work that's usually reserved for social service groups and community organizers. James?
Thank you. Thank you guys for having me, Haitian Times, MacOlive. I first want to say that, it was definitely a fulfilling experience to be able to help the Haitian people who came through Houston. Del Rio's in our backyard, and for them to come through Houston was one of the things that we had to be first and foremost to lead in action. So HHU, Houston Haitians United, was founded in September of 2015. However, the genesis of the idea of the organization came from May 2015, where Houston experienced some severe flooding. We got like 162 billion gallons of water in less than 15 hours, which is a problem for Houston because the drainage in the city is just really not that quick, as opposed to other areas like South Florida. So the reason behind it was that we knew that there was community leaders knew that there were families who needed aid with, filling out FEMA applications and stuff like that, because it was declared a disaster. So the genesis of the organization came from us wanting to help our community. Fast forward, we've been involved with Hurricane Matthew, earthquakes, assassination, quite a few different things that happened in the past 6 years of the creation of the organization. And we still stand by, what it was created for, to help. Secondly, the organization is here to be able to uplift Haitians, promote Haitian business, connect the dots with Haitians who are moving here, transient Haitians and Haitian Americans, and also to express the Haitian culture to the city of Houston. So therefore, we've built a really great relationship with the city of Houston, and the city of Houston put us in touch with an organization called the National Association of Christian Churches. They have a disaster relief center here and a migrant transition center. They're mainly dealing with migrants from Mexico, Honduras, Belize, and things like that. However, they have been getting an influx of Haitian families, and so that's where the cohesiveness of our organization and that organization came together. So when the earthquake happened, we were there standing side by side with NACC, working with them in their facility to help, raise some supplies for the earthquake relief. And then this happened with the migrants. So on day one, when this became national news, we were already in contact with the city and working with NACC to get some volunteers together, because we knew that we're going to have an influx of migrants that they're not used to. Plus, they can't translate, so we have to be able to be there to translate.
And if I might, for a little bit, can you give us a little bit more color around that call that you received? Like, who called you and what did they say that made you go, oh man, this is big. We need to get some more volunteers on the ground to help out?
Well, yeah, we work with NACC and the city of Houston. So when this became national news, we were already on the call. We were already emailing back and forth. So I can't even tell you who initiated the first call, because we already knew that this was something that we were going to have to work with, because we knew that they were going to be coming through NACC. So once, we started having meetings with NACC, I think that Monday, the first bus arrived around 11:30 p.m. And then the second bus arrived like 11:50 p.m. 60 people on each bus. So, that night we didn't have enough volunteers to handle that many. So we saw that there was going to be a need for volunteers. So we made a call out on our social media for volunteers. I mean, we were really just calling out for the volunteers in the Houston area or Austin or, nearby places. And we were overwhelmed with all of the support that the Haitian American community across the nation gave us. They were flying in from Miami, Boston, everywhere. And so, yeah, at the apex of the situation, I believe on Wednesday, we had 9 buses. So think about it. 9 buses, 60 people on each bus. It's a lot of people. But we called out for people. We saw that the needs that were needed were, the people have to be they're not usually staying in the transition center for more than 3 to 4 days.
Right.
And the more people you can transition out of the transition center, the more people you can bring in. So we're like, okay, we're getting 9 buses. We need to help get people out. So the community, the Haitian American community around the nation, we're sending donations to HHU to help buy tickets. Now, for some point of clarity, some of the migrants had money. Some of them had money. They wanted to buy their tickets, or their sponsors were able to buy their tickets. But we felt that it was important for us to help dampen the financial blow. So we were buying the plane tickets for them and giving them money to put in their pockets, so that whenever they arrived at their destination, that they could get there. Now, in mind, we're not buying tickets for 2-3 days later. We're buying tickets for the same day or the next day. So it was really, really, really good that we were able to get that much support and resources from the Haitian American community to help people get to where they needed to be immediately.
Oh, that's wonderful. So about how many people would you say, like volunteers, physically arrived in Houston, and about how much money, if you, recall or have that data, were you through HHU?
So, cool. We didn't quantify. I know that there was one point we had at least 500 people register to volunteer. So I didn't quantify. We didn't quantify those numbers, but I do remember one conversation was about 500 people that reserved volunteer time. We were able to spend about $60,000 on plane tickets, cash to give out, buying food, hair products, whatever we needed to do, the food products, so we can help cook Haitian food as the migrants were arriving, so that they could have something that was familiar to them. We spent about $60,000 with airfare included, and raised about $20,000 more than that And that's just pretty much where we're at right now. And we're still working with that money that we have, the resources, so that we can help the migrants that are still coming, because we got 20,000 that are still coming, and to help the ones that have already transitioned through. And also, we're still getting contacted by migrants that are in Nicaragua, Mexico City, Colombia, for help to get to where they're going. So that's where we're using that money.
Wow, that's amazing. So Sancha, I'm curious to know, as a community organizer, right, based in Miami, what was it like for you to actually see this happen? And to give our audience just some idea of your work, I'll just introduce you really quickly while you get off the mic. Everyone, Sancha Etienne is the Miami organizer for BAJI, that's the Black Alliance for Just Immigration. In this role, the organization educates and engages both African American and Black immigrant communities in general to organize and advocate for racial, social, and economic justice. Their flagship project is actually the Black Immigration Network, or BIN, and it's a national alliance that brings together Black-led organizations and programs to advance just immigration policies and promote these cultural shifts that we're seeking. And Sancha, from her base in Miami, was one of the people we saw on the ground at numerous rallies, conducting different actions in the weeks surrounding the border crisis. So Sancha, I'm curious to know what the response was from people like BAJI, groups like yours that we saw just really mobilize fairly quickly to demand a stop to the deportations and start advocating for just a different, more humane immigration policy. Can you walk us through how you mobilized?
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me well?
We hear you.
It's a pleasure to be on with you all and to talk about this issue that we know it's not just a Haitian issue, it's a human rights issue. And for Baji, when you are based in Miami, in the heart of a Haitian community, like a large Haitian community, and you see what's happening at the border, and the first thing is just break my heart as a Haitian descent. My mom, my dad, I was born in Haiti, and it just broke our hearts. But how to deal with that, you know? Haitian and non-Haitian activists across the U.S. Reacted to the influx with rallies and action, like from Boston to Brooklyn to the Biscayne Boulevard in Miami. And this is how we could react to what was happening, because we needed answers. We needed the administration to do something like ASAP, if not like right away. And what we see now, it's still not, this administration is still not responding to our demands. And let me say this. So I think first thing that must be said is that this mistreatment of Haitian or Black migrants in general is not new, right? In the 80s and the 90s, when Cubans got green cards for fleeing oppression, Haitians were detained, expelled, and said to be carrying HIV. The reality is what we saw at Del Rio was caught on camera, but Haitians, Cameroonians, Angolans, Ethiopians have been over criminalized at our borders for decades. So what we learned this last few weeks is that this administration is no different from previous ones. They promised dignity and compassion, but what we got, horses and whips. That is why so many Black advocates group went into action, and we saw so many rallies, protests, lawsuits, investigation, you name it, because we know if we don't call this administration out for how they treat Black migrants, no one else will. So what I think we are learning in real time is we can't support Black migrants. You can forget any meaningful immigration legislation that will meaningfully support any communities.
Wow. So I'm curious to take it from there when I come back around to you in terms of like what people can do to make sure that we get to the point where the immigration laws make more sense for our people, for Black and Brown immigrants, Sancha. But you did mention that this has been going on for decades. I think it's why someone like Jocelyn McCalla, who's on, his perspective is important to share with everyone because he's been on the ground advocating for human rights now for a long time. I won't date him too much, but by quick way of introduction, I'll let everyone know who your bona fides really quickly, Johnny, and then you can take the question of just the decades of treatment of Haitian immigrants that we've seen in this country. So Jocelyn McCalla, for you all who are not familiar with him, leads JMC Strategies, which provides consulting services to a wide range of leaders, governmental, intergovernmental, and non-governmental organizations. He has served as executive director of the National Coalition for Haitian Rights and of the New Jersey Immigration Policy Network. He has long campaigned in favor of human rights, democracy, and the rule of law in Haiti as well, and for the rights of Haitians abroad. So with that said, Johnny, you've again been on the ground since the 80s, 90s, maybe even before. Can you talk to us a little bit, just a tad, about what this has been like for Haitians coming into the United States and what we understand about the history of Haitian migration that's really continuing to make this a cycle with us, where we leave Haiti, we come here, and we deal with the immigration policies that some of us are forced to deal with. Johnny, you on mute. Let's just give Johnny a second here. Can try to unmute you.
Okay, I'm unmuted.
Yes, thanks.
Okay. I started to say thanks for the introduction. I'm grateful for it. But the first takeaway from the Haitian refugee experience is the following. One, Haitian refugees have never been welcomed willingly in the United States. To a great extent, most Haitian refugees secured asylum and became eventually permanent residents and citizens, frankly, thanks to a very arduous work done by a variety of people. The Haitian refugees started to wash ashore in South Florida in 1972. They were very quickly put in detention, and the first boatload of Haitians had the support of a number of religious congregations, and thanks to that religious congregation, they were released on bond. But before they were released on bond, one, in fact, committed suicide in jail. Then that led to the formation of the Haitian Refugee Center down in Florida, which no longer exists. But some of the people who've been associated with the Haitian Refugee Center include Marlon Bastien, who is now the director of the Family Action Network Movement, as well as Cheryl Little, who heads the American for Immigrant Justice in South Florida and Miami. So you've got a number of people who've been associated with the struggle of Haitian refugees. I myself was involved with several groups in New York City, community groups that provided the kind of assistance that Pierre described, that his group provided to people in Houston. And then eventually I made my way to working with the National Coalition for Haitian Refugees, which was essentially established in 1982. And the NCHR was a coalition not just of Haitian groups, but a lot of civil rights, religious labor organizations. So its chairman was Bishop Bevilacqua of the Brooklyn Diocese. He was at the time the head of the Center for Migration of the U.S. Catholic Church. And the vice chair was none other than Bayard Rustin. Bayard Rustin, as you may know, is credited with having organized the 63 March in Washington that rallied, where for the first time you saw hundreds of thousands of people rallying in Washington for civil rights. So Bayard Rustin was a key member and a key mover and shaker at the coalition. I'm very proud to have been associated with these guys. They're no longer with us. But the fact is that, you know, what you have to take away from this is that there have been coalitions, there have been organizations, there have been very large movements. And as a result of the very large movement, a few things happen. One, there has been litigation all along. In other words, institutions have sued the US government left and right on behalf of Haitian refugees or Haitian asylum seekers. Institutions have also lobbied for change in the law. So in 1986, we got the Cuban Haitian provision, which essentially granted Haitian asylum seekers that who arrived in the United States before 1982. The law was enacted in 1986. Those who arrived in 1982 were granted permanent residency going back to 1982. And that means that they could become permanent resident right away and US citizens the next day if they wanted to. Other key moments in the struggle for Haitian refugees came when Haitians were detained in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, thousands of them, and many of them were then left behind because they were deemed to be HIV positive, and therefore the US did not know what to do with them. So we sued the United States for that, and we won that part, and most of them came to the United States. In fact, I'm in touch with a few of them still. Then eventually in 1997, you had a pressure on the Clinton administration to led to another law that granted Haitian refugees permanent residency. So I think that, you know, what you see here, I mean, and when we were discussing my involvement in this, we said, well, no, frankly, what we have to do is say, let's try to go beyond the outrage and take and have a very comprehensive effort going forward. Otherwise, and that comprehensive effort includes what you would call humanitarian assistance, political rallies, lobbying, lawsuits, legal assistance to Haitian asylum seekers, and so on.
Moving forward.
Thanks for joining us. Can you stay on mute, please, until you're ready? Sorry about that, Johnny. But just to recap, it's what I think the main takeaway from what you're saying is that this is a fight that's been going on since 1972, essentially. And through a combination of lawsuits, like you said, lobbying, social services, and social assistance, we've been able to make some headway, and even was able to have, I think we described as what we commonly know as amnesty for Haitians going back to 1982. So I think that says a lot about what we've learned works and over the years. And so for those who are wondering what to do, some of the things that Johnny mentioned around the need for a comprehensive effort is definitely a main takeaway that we'll get into in a little bit. I do have a couple other folks I wanted to introduce really quickly. One of them is Dr. Kawal Biwa Joseph. Dr. Joseph is one of the many volunteers who responded to the call that HHU put out when the influx of asylum seekers came in. And so she was among those on the ground, helping them at the shelter and getting them on buses and whatnot. But Dr. Joseph has also been very involved through the years with Haitian causes, both as an academic and an administrator. And she does a lot of work now with organizations in Haiti and throughout the diaspora. So I really want to have her take on what she's noticing as someone who's been on the ground and interacted with these migrants, and also what she's noticed in her travels with the groups that she works with in Haiti, to see if there are any linkages there that we also need to be aware of when we're looking at these influxes. So to put it more succinctly, one, Dr. Joseph, can you tell us what some of the more key moments that you experienced with the asylum seekers at the border were? And when you look at that in contrast to what you're noticing in your recent trips to Haiti, like what strikes you about these two worlds that we find ourselves living in as Haitian Americans?
Yes, as a fairly new resident to Houston, Texas, I was really very pleased to join HHU in the efforts, that they had going for helping the Haitian migrants that came to Houston. I have to say hats off to James and HHU and all of the members of that organization, because they really rolled up their sleeves and did what needed to be done. So I was very impressed with the organization, and I had lots of members of my family, my sister, my niece, who volunteered because we saw the need. So in terms of, what I experienced, it was, of course, heartbreaking. And, to speak to the people who were coming, they needed translation services. They needed food, as James referred to before. That center was used to receiving, Latino, Hispanic immigrants. And so we definitely wanted to make sure that our immigrants this time felt at home and felt welcomed after, this 2-month trek of trying to get here. And so my niece, who is a caterer, volunteered to cook. We were there doing all kinds of things. We even made homemade pickles for them to feed them and help them. And they were really very thankful that we were on the ground. The stories they shared, as I said, heartbreaking. And every bus, 60 to 65 people, about a dozen pregnant women. So you wondered, some of them 7 months, some of them 8 months pregnant, how they do this, how they made this. And so the resilience of our people is really all I can say, and really attest to the strength to really want to see a change. One really difficult moment for me was when I said to one young lady who shared an awful lot with us about the details of her trip to get here. When I said to her, well, you just, left this hellish experience. And she said, the hellish experience? She said, we are so happy we made it because the hell was Haiti. That was heartbreaking for me, because to hear that the hell was Haiti, and these people had already left years ago and went to Chile and went to Brazil, was really devastating. And so when I travel to Haiti and I talk to people in Haiti, I am constantly now convinced that it is our problem and we need to fix it. And we need to fix it ourselves, because we've been saying for years that we don't want intervention. The intervention has not been good. It has not been helpful for us. And at this point, I think Haitians really have to organize to help Haiti do what it needs to do. To keep people in their countries, we've had tremendous brain drain. Every year, when the educational system produces the creme de la creme, all of the kids who are so bright, they end up leaving. They study in other countries and they don't come back. The percentages are clear, only about 1% return. And the 1% that returns, I've spoken to some of them too. They're trying to run businesses and trying to do things, and they're having a very difficult time. So when you have a country that is, unruly and, no governance and no safety, how do you expect people to want to come back? Because if we put ourselves in their place, we wouldn't want to do it. Yet that is what is necessary. That is what we really need to do, is to help Haiti get back on its feet. And I'm also on the board of ACT, an organization that is trying to do this kind of work to build sustainable projects and sustainability in Haiti. And ACT stands for Haiti Community Trust. I've also been working with a think tank called Chukata, which is a consortium for a Haiti that works, on combat pour Haiti tête en haut. And these two groups I've given most of my time to this year, especially to help and make sure that we raise the funds, we organize to get to where we need to be as a community. The Haiti that was, the Haiti that we know, the glorious past, can be if we, reorganize the country. Some people have been lately, comparing Haiti to Rwanda, and that Rwanda has done it in one generation. And I'm like, great, Rwanda did it in one generation, but there was also a genocide of about 1 million people. And there was also a plan of action of what the next steps were, or what the next steps can be. So if we are not planning and if we're not organizing to get there, it's going to be very difficult, to turn that, to make that turn. The other group I know on the ground in Haiti that's been working and has also gotten involved with the diaspora is the Commission. We've all heard of the Commission that is, trying to make changes and bring people together in Haiti around, one table to see if we could come up with solutions. And I think those are the directions that we need to continue working on.
So it sounds like a mix of just solutions to get into to segue into what we can do, right? In the short term, the immediate term, the medium term, and the long term. There's just a variety of solutions that each of us could have a hand in playing. So before I go to Attorney Pereira, Mary Pereira, I did want to say thank you, Dr. Joseph, for bringing in that view. I think it shows why you're one of our greatest and brightest in terms of Haitian Americans in the diaspora. For those who don't know, Dr. Joseph, I forgot to mention in her bio, is a past president of CUNY's Bronx Community College and a university professor. In 2005, she became the first Haitian-born person to be president of a college in the United States. And she's very well known for her trailblazing work, which includes bringing us organizations like ABETAC, which is the Haitian Bilingual / ESL Technical Center in New York, and also bringing just bilingual teacher and parent education programs into New York City schools. So thank you, Dr. Joseph. It's an honor to have you on. And it's really inspiring to see you continuing to do all of this work in retirement, so-called. It sounds really
so-called.
So
Yeah.
talk through some of the solutions. I wanted to get a perspective from Marie Pereira, who's on with us. Marie is an attorney, esquire, and registered nurse, which is, I think, a very interesting combination. She's in private practice in New York and started out after law school, I believe, as an assistant DA, district attorney in the Bronx. Her practice now focuses on criminal defense, immigration, and matrimonial law. And currently, she dedicates much of her time and energies to helping the undocumented Haitians who are coming in now, who qualify for TPS, temporary protective status. Whether those coming in right now qualify or will is a whole other story, because only those who were here through July 29th, I believe, qualify. But Marie in her work also helps people with work authorization applications free of charge, which is very nice to know for anyone who needs that support. And the reason she lends herself to the community in this way is because she strongly believes that helping vulnerable members of our community to gain meaningful employment promotes economic freedom, jumpstarts generational wealth, and boosts the economies of both the United States and Haiti. So Marie, welcome. Thank you for being on. Tell us, if you would, what your perspective is on what Haitians can do, some pragmatic things we can do regardless of our professions or means.
Thank you for having me. And I feel completely like, who is she talking about? The only thing I would change is to say that I actually devote all of my time to doing humanitarian work now, and I'm not actively taking on new cases in my office. So I am basically a volunteer for the people. My perspective is, a lot of people think that you need to help the entire world to make a difference. And in my opinion, you can help one person at a time and make a difference. If we all just took one person under our wings, like, for instance, the people coming from under the Del Rios Bridge. I received a lot of phone calls when there was a frenzy of people rushing to the border, catching planes and booking flights and saying, let's go, let's go. I feel some of it was very, very genuine, but I also think some of it was just, an opportunity for the gram. I received a phone call from someone and, I said to myself, okay, if I jump on a plane, I have to pay for the ticket. Once I get there, I'm going to need to book a hotel room. I'm going to have to pay for meals, maybe even rent a car. We're looking at maybe a 3-day trip to the border, not knowing exactly where I'm going, who's going to let me into the key areas where you need to be let in, because they weren't just opening doors for everyone.
Right.
So I said, this trip could cost me roughly $1,500 conservatively. And I said, instead of doing that, why don't I adopt a family from under the bridge? And I guess God heard me and sort of brought the family to me, because as soon as I hung up from that conversation, I received a phone call from a non-for-profit group who says, we have a family here from the Del Rios Bridge. It was almost scripted. And I said, can you get me in contact with them? And they got me in contact with the people. Fast forward, I personally made a contribution of cash to the Zelle of the person they were staying with, because clearly they don't have a Zelle yet. And so I trusted that person. It was a family member. The money got to them the same weekend. I was privileged enough to meet up with them, and I actually saw them, a young man, his wife, and their baby. And I connected with them on a human level. Not to say that the people who made it to the border and who did significant work at the border didn't have a role, but I felt like for me, that was my best way of contributing based on my circumstance. I opened a GoFundMe page for them. I was able to raise within 10 days, $2,600. They used that money to contribute to living in the space that they were living, because at the end of the day, this person took them in, and they made 7 people in a 2-bedroom apartment. And so they used that money to sort of pay their way, fill the fridge with food. It sounds, petty, but you're staying with someone who wasn't even expecting you.
Right.
3 new mouths to feed. You need to do what you need to do. So I helped them do that. I called WIC for the baby, and I made all the calls and downloaded their IDs, and I was able to get the baby WIC. I was able to get the baby health insurance. I personally left home and drove to Brooklyn, picked up the WIC card, brought it to them downtown Brooklyn, because they don't have, way to get around. The man works where they are. They don't know their way. I did all of that. And for me, that's better than taking my $1,500 and rushing to the border, and I don't want to say everyone who went down there went to get a picture for the gram, but for me, that was my best way of contributing. And I guess my contribution to this conversation would be help one person at a time if you can't help the entire world. Because if we all did that, think about the big difference that it would make. And for me too, I don't work well in big groups. I don't do well in, 20 people chats, and it's just not for me. So I would rather take one personal project on and do that. So when I started my TPS project, I received a lot of phone calls from people who said, how can I help? And I appreciate that. But for me, in my circumstance, in my frame of mind, I work better alone. So yes, everybody has my cell phone number. They see my card, and my daughter helped me. She has a Twitter account. She posted it. I did an appearance on WPIX, and that catapulted me nationwide. And I get calls all the time on my cell. I'm a 1-woman operation. It works fine for me. And I feel a personal sense of achievement with that. So that's my perspective.
Thank you, Marie, for sharing that with us. I think it's very important for people to look around at, as you said, their circumstances, to see how they can help within their means, within their home, their communities. Because yeah, you're absolutely right. Not everyone needs to be in WO. Not everyone can actually afford to be at some of the rallies and actions that take place because of different obligations or health reasons. So it is important to get creative, I think, is what you're saying, and figuring out how you can help. So now to think about, like I said, we've touched on some like short-term things people can do, some medium-term and like long-term pieces. I am curious to know, with 20,000 people, like James mentioned, on their way here still, right? We're expecting another influx of mostly Haitian asylum seekers to arrive at the border in the next couple of weeks. Some are in Tapachula now, I believe, working through what that means with the folks in that town to see how long they can stay or when they'll actually get on the road again to make it here. So what we're seeing clearly is this is not something that will stop really anytime soon. So what do we do now as a community? Dr. Joseph touched on, go ahead, Marie, you wanted to say something?
I wanted to say, not that I want to be Debbie Downer, but the truth is, a lot of the people who are coming from those countries are not bona fide asylum seekers. I don't want to say it like a blanket statement because I haven't, of course, done an interview with any of those people. But I think it's safe to say that a lot of them are fleeing economic oppression. And there's a big difference between being an asylum seeker and a person who is fleeing violence, economic oppression, nutritional deprivation, lack of employment, and things like that. There's also, I'm not justifying what the US is doing by not even allowing them to make a claim, because valid claim or not, everyone under the US laws and treaties who presents themselves at a border has the right to make the claim, and then they have the right to due process to be adjudicated. That part, them using that Title 42 to say we can't even hear you out because there's such a pandemic of disease, you guys have to get out of here. Just you breathing, your breath across the border is going to create a problem. I'm not justifying that, but I think even those that are given the opportunity to do the first interview, what's called a credible fear interview, and they get past that stage, it is very unlikely they're going to muster all the criteria that it requires to qualify for a bona fide asylum claim. I believe that the only solution for these people would be a humanitarian-based relief, because it is a humanitarian crisis. The asylum is not a fit for this. And I think US officials, they know this. They needed to clear the optics from under the bridge quickly because it was getting really bad, especially after the US envoy, Daniel Foote, resigned, and he wrote that scathing letter, which put everybody on blast. They had to move those people. The next day, it was like ghost town, but they know that a lot of these people, they sent a lot of them home, and those that they allowed in, unless they extend TPS to those people, I don't see what program would really fit to meet their needs. And I wanted to say also, with my TPS project, I don't just fill the form out for them. It's a collaborative effort, because at the end of the day, you don't have to be an attorney to complete a TPS. And I would like to have all the accolades and have people think it's complicated, but anyone can complete a TPS. It's more biographical information, and it is not that serious if you have somebody helping you. So if all you could do is, if the person doesn't have a computer, print the form. Sit with them and say, they're asking for the names of your father. Father means papao or mamao. Do that. If that's all you have to contribute, is showing them how to mail something, certified mail return receipt. So they're involved in the whole process. Some of them, I don't even meet them. I have a system, I email them questions, they download the form, answer my questions back, take pics of it, and I do the application with them. Sometimes they do it on their end on the phone, or sometimes I do it and I mail it off to them. Because after this, I tell them, I'm doing it for you right now. When you learn how to do it, I need for you to do it for your friend. Tell your friend how to fill out that money order and what type of money order it needs to be, where they're mailing it to. And I've gotten some of them that I've taught to do it, and they're in a group and they do it for each other.
That's great. So Marie, you brought up so many follow-up questions, and we're already at time, and we haven't even gone to Q&A yet, but I did touch on a few things. People with their hands up.
If I could add a couple of things.
Okay, Johnny, and then James, who had
very, very shortly. I think that we also have to bear in mind that Mexico is not just a transit country. Mexico is also taking steps to return the Haitians back to Haiti. So while there may be claims that 20,000 Haitians will eventually make it to the southern border, note that Tapachula is way down. We're down by Mexico's southern border with Central America. So there may not be that many who make it up to the southern border of the United States. The second thing I would say is that, yes, I think there's another element, that a tool that is available to the administration is to grant what is called DED, Deferred Enforcement Departure status, to the Haitian who are seeking asylum in the United States. I think Marie is right. It's a difficult proposition to gain asylum today. In fact, it's even more difficult today than it used to be back 20 or 30 years ago. But there are many more tools available to the administration to figure out how to respond both to the crisis in Haiti as well as its domestic and international obligations.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, this migrant crisis isn't happening in a bubble. It's all tied to Haiti. It goes to the root. Um, you know, that's where it starts, is with Haiti. So again, I'm glad Dr. Joseph mentioned Haiti and brought that into the conversation, because it's not a coincidence that at the same time with the kidnappings, earthquake, you know, assassination, we see more numbers coming directly from Haiti through the high seas, right? People starting to take boats again, and the US Coast Guard reporting more interdictions at sea. And at the same time, in Latin America, we see some of these new governments that have come on board there in the past couple of years are being much less friendly to Haitians and refusing to, you know, be as open as before. And I'm speaking about Chile in particular, because their new president has just really made it arduous for Haitians to live there. So it's a confluence of factors. So we can't just look at what we can do in moments of crisis when something is happening at the time, but what we need to do long term with both Haiti, how we treat people who are living abroad, all these migration patterns we're seeing from Haiti through Latin America, and then up to the United States, and how we're growing ourselves as a community, as a diaspora. So I'll stop preaching for now, because a couple people have been super patient. I do want to give folks an opportunity for questions or comments. James, I believe you had your hand up. Did you still want to add something, or are you good?
Yeah, I just wanted to add one more thing, and it's just has to do with answering the question of what can we do. I think it's important as a diaspora for us to get organized. And what I mean by that is there shouldn't only be a Houston Haitians United. There should be a Jacksonville Haitians United. There should be Atlanta, there should be Chicago, Philadelphia Haitians United, because the migrants were coming through Houston, but we were sending them to various places in the United States. We have no way to keep up with them, to reach out to see if there's, you know, anything going on. It would be really nice if we had a, you know, New York, New Jersey Haitians United or Chicago Haitians United that we can reach out to and say, hey, how is, you know, such and such doing? You know, what can we help them with, and things like that. So I think if anybody's listening to this and you're in the Metro Center, just try to get, you know, organized. So as you know, this situation is not over yet, and you know, we're going to be here. If it's in our backyard, we're going to help. We just want the rest of the Haitian American community to be organized and be able to help as well.
No, it's a really good point. Some of the questions we have coming through revolve around what, you know, Johnny mentioned with like legal work that needs to be done. You know, Sancho talked about the need earlier for having, you know, impacting immigration policy that makes sense for Black people in this country, or trying to come into this country. So I'd really like to hear from you guys just a little bit more about what that looks like for different individuals or groups in the community. And while you think about your answer, let me just bring in Kenny for a little bit, because I know he's been involved in Brooklyn in different actions to raise awareness at the federal level. For folks who don't know Kenny Altador, he's a professional painter and portraitist who also serves as the Brooklyn ambassador for Brooklyn Borough Hall. His artwork, Kenny is known for that beautiful mural in Canarsie of George Floyd that's become sort of like a local tourist attraction, because he did it at the height of the Black Lives Matter movement. And it's been a rallying point for many people in the community who are looking for a place to gather and raise awareness about different issues and concerns going on. So that's part of Kenny's job now, I guess officially, is to be that cultural link between things happening in the community and things happening inside our legislative spaces or our community leader spaces. So talk to us a little bit, Kenny, in the short time we have, about what you have been able to do as an artist, as an example of how we can all use the tools available to us to be to contribute to this long fight.
Thank you for having me. Hello, everyone. My name is Kenny Altador, artist, activist, and also Brooklyn ambassador at Ball Hall, representing the Haitian community in Brooklyn, New York. So with the artist talent, so I use that to send a message to the community that, you know, they should put 1804 on the street instead of Black Lives Matter, because since 1791 we start this movement. So since you mentioned George Floyd, I'm the artist that did George Floyd mural, so I get a lot of coverage through that mural. But if you're looking at the mural, there's a meaningful behind that painting, where I show George Floyd and there's two flags. For those of you if you haven't seen this, there's two flags. I show you the Haitian flags, and then there's the American flag, and I put George Floyd right in the middle of it. So Haitian represent the first Black country, and America represent the first white country. So I put George Floyd right in the center just to show them the way that they've been treating Black people. So at the same token, I put my flag there to let them know that we start this movement, Black Lives Matter, since 1791. And again, in Canarsie, the population in Canarsie, most of them are Haitians. So that painting is very meaningful. So I was doing it to send a message to the community, to you know, exactly the Donald Trump administration, that, you know, Black Lives Matter. So now, just to move on with the activist movement, I've been doing murals for Fallen Heroes, NYPD, for 17 years. SDNY and personal murals. So whenever I'm doing those murals, is to bring the gap between the community and the cops. So I've been doing a lot through the artwork. Now, in terms of activism in my community, you know, I've been trying to get us together, especially our clergies. They're not together. They're all very powerful people, especially the pastors who have like 500 people. Some of them have 1,000 people. So let's say those clergy put themselves together. And we have a lot of churches in New York City. So that's a very powerful movement. So I've been trying to get them in one room, talking back and forth. I just had one for the Brooklyn Six, because you guys already know that, you know, we have 6 guys, Brooklyn Six, who actually was advocate for our people at Brooklyn Bridge, just to, you know, just to send a message to the, sorry, somebody calling me. Sorry, somebody was just calling me on my phone, sorry. Just to send a message to the Biden administration to stop what they're doing, the way they've been treating us. So they got arrested. They went to the court on the 15th. So they asked them to plead guilty for 6 months, and they refused to do so. So I was out there advocate with a few people, where they sent them back on the 29th of this month to go to in front of the judge for a hearing. So at the same token, I'm sending a message out there to you guys. If you could make it on the 29th, to come out there to support those 6 guys, Brooklyn Six. They've been doing a marvelous job. There's I appreciate the type of work that they did. They put themselves, they're not only talking, they did the action by getting themselves arrested at the Brooklyn Bridge. I respect that. So that's the reason why I put a license together on the 29th for, you know, the community to come out to support those 6 people who got arrested. Because if you don't support them, they're gonna be like, who the hell are they?
Right.
Blocking Brooklyn Bridge. These people, they don't have nobody with them. So they're gonna, you know, spend 15 days in jail. You know, so your support would be greatly appreciated. And, you know, I've been doing this, try to help, try to put the community together. Well, with that being said, I don't know if you guys have any questions for me.
No, I think you said it well, that obviously there are different actions taking place. It goes back to, no matter what your skill set or talent is, try to figure out how to put it to use, because this movement is going to take everybody doing what they can raise awareness and to drive towards a solution that's sustainable for Haitian Americans and for Haiti. So thank you, Kenny, for contributing that.
And also at the same token, after the 29, the groups, with different leaders, we're gonna brainstorm to come up with a massive rally, so that it's in place. Of course, there's different groups who are doing different things, and I'm trying to put everybody on one boat, on one, to speak the same language, get together, and then let's do what we did April 20th, shake Brooklyn Bridge. So I don't know if we're gonna go to Brooklyn Bridge, but we're gonna have to go to a federal building.
Yeah, well, that is wonderful work. Keep it up. And all the panelists, if you haven't already, please put your websites and your social media handles in the chat for people to follow you and stay in touch with you so they know how to help you as well if you're looking for support or they want to know just how you've been able to help folks the way that you have. So go ahead and just put that in the chat for everyone to see. We are at time, unfortunately, but I did want to go back to Sancha and Johnny to talk through very specifically, right? If I can't go to the Brooklyn Bridge to get arrested, or I don't really have the time to sit through a TPS application with someone or to host them and sponsor them in my house like Marie is doing, right? And James and HSU, they're reaching out to different folks to get volunteers to come on the ground to volunteer. What can I do to make sure that that longer term or medium term solution actually continues throughout these moments of crisis, like through in between the crises that we have? What can we all do to affect that change at a policy level? So Johnny and then Sancha, and then I'll go around one last time for final thoughts from everyone.
Well, perhaps Sancha could she hasn't been silent for quite a while, so maybe she should go ahead.
He's been very patient. Go ahead, Sancha.
Go ahead.
All right, thank you, Johnny. I think first we have to recognize our destinies are tied. Good immigration policy that leaves our Black migrants or folks with records is not acceptable. That's one. So when we organize around the situation at Del Rio, we must also push for the security of Haitian migrants, but not forget our Cameroonians, brothers and sisters that were there as well. So what I'm saying is we need Haitian TPS and Cameroonian TPS, right? Also, we have to learn there is no reform in the system every time there is a surge. Haitian and Black migrants aren't welcomed. They are denied asylum, detained, and expelled. So we have to make it clear that this is unacceptable. Haitian and Black migrants cannot be the negotiating pound to make Republican happy or to get other groups immigration benefits. So if you cannot show up for Black migrants, then you are not providing a compassionate and dignified immigration policy. Finally, I would say no political party or elected will save us. We have to be our own salvation and hold these people accountable, because they will come when they need us. So we are going to make them uncomfortable if they can't show up for us when we need them. And I appreciate Madame Carol. I believe she talked about um, Haiti, how we also have to um, get through our conscious and understand that we have to take care of home so our people can stay home. They don't feel like they have to go somewhere else and get inhuman treatment, but we make the country like it was when we didn't have to leave and go elsewhere to be treating like the way they have been treating us. So therefore, I think I personally as a Haitian woman, I'm talking for these pregnant women that show up at the Del Rio Texas Bridge and be um, and present of this such treatment. It's inhuman, but we have to send this message to the government. Okay, I say government because we have to send that message to them and for them to take in consideration what's happening. We have to make Haiti whole again and take control of the situation and make it a place that us Haitian people feel like we are free, like we did fight and get the freedom that
1804.
we got. So it's just these people, they think all the time about the pockets. Everything that they are doing is not including Haitian people. It's just like they thinking about just themselves, and they need to stop that so that us Haitian people, that we feel at home, really at home, that we don't have to go anywhere else to be treated badly, but stay home and work. There is work for us. um we not There's no fear that if we get out on the street that we're gonna get kidnapped or they're gonna kill us, or we feel great at home like we should.
No, I think all of these pieces are so tied together. But as Haitians in the in the U.S. diaspora, right? We're talking about 1.1 million people in the U.S. What can we do from here, where we are in the U.S., to make sure that the people you're talking about who have the power to affect that policy change at the federal level actually do it? What do we have to do? Like, so many of us are citizens, and like our kids are here, we're voting, we're doing all of the things. Like, how do we make that, how do we harness that power, right? Johnny, you mentioned back in the day there was a lot done around like legislation and just pushing for different policies. How did it happen then? What did we learn from that that we can maybe repeat this time around to drive through those changes, with the recognition in mind that the story of Haiti and freedom for Haiti is really the story of freedom and liberation for Black people worldwide, and really eradicating racism in the US?
Well, but the lesson I take away from the past is the following, frankly. That number one, in order for Haitians to influence policies at the national level in Washington, D.C., there must be a significant presence, not in numbers of Haitians, but significant presence in terms of the power, to be front and center where policy is being made and where policy is being discussed. I mean, obviously, because the apparent whipping of Haitians at the border was so outrageous. There have been many workshops, many talks, many forums, and the think tanks in Washington, including the Inter-American Dialogue and so on, when they've all been at it, and if you got any number of advice being given to the administration, except that most of the people who are involved in it are not Haitian. So you have so the Haitian voice is still missing. In order for that Haitian voice to have an impact, that Haitian voice must be there. It must be organized. The fact is that there are going to be many individual responses to the crisis, and I think most of them are going to be very good. And we need, and in fact, involvement begins with individual commitments. I mean, that's how I became involved. So frankly, before I made my way to an organization, to a community, and essentially began to become more active, I became involved in many other ways. So to some extent, part of what we need to understand is that since the Haiti crisis is not going to go away anytime soon, since it is going to fuel a migration from Haiti and seeking safe haven everywhere in the Caribbean, across the border in the Dominican Republic, and in Central and South America and in North America, we're going to have a situation that demands that's going to call on us to become much more active. So we better start organizing now. We better start structuring ourselves now, so that we can do better. Now, obviously, there are a number of tools that you can use. Lobbying, meetings with lawmakers in DC, meeting with policymakers in Washington, and trying to influence the foreign policy of the United States through the hearings that are being held by the House Foreign Affairs Committee. And you have in New York City, Congressman Meeks, who was the chair of that committee, who was a friend of Haiti and so on. But at the same time, there's one thing that we need to raise, is the fact that if we're saying that Haitians' lives matter, and that to some extent Haitians did initiate a launch, the movement, to say that Black people's lives matter, then I think that there is a need for us to mobilize our brothers and sisters in the Black community in a much bigger way than we've been able to do it. So there needs to be a lot of education, of our brothers and sisters in the Black community, so that they can be part of this. I think that we are very lucky. I mean, I can tell you that it was. I mean, I went all over the place back in the days, and I was all over the media as well. And I think that we are far more skilled people, far more committed people. But what we do lack is an understanding of the complexity of the problem, so that we need to move from an emotional response to a reasoned response, take into account all that needs to be taken care of. And that also means that eventually money must be put on the table.
Yeah, it's very hard though for people not to react emotionally when you see, babies crawling, under a bridge, or horses being chased, stuff being said about Haiti. That's just so, abusive, really. So I think we've heard from different folks before that it is important to have that emotional reaction, right? But then what do you do with that next? And I think what you're saying is how we can connect that. Like, have the emotional reaction, do what you got to do.
Translate that emotional reaction into something tangible, and that's going to be, really demand quite a bit from you.
Yeah.
Frankly.
Yeah. Dr. Did you want to say something, Kawal? I think you had your hand.
Yeah, I really would like to say that in addition to whatever organizations already exist, because we have a plethora of organizations around the country.
Yeah.
They may not be named, united, but, we have a lot. I think what we're missing is one national voice. So one national organization that at the strike of a moment, whatever occurs, whatever the issue is, that voice can stand up and represent the Haitian community. So at this point, I think, all the organizations probably need to come together now to organize a national voice so that one organization speaks out. Every other ethnic group has it. And if we don't do that, we are going to be spinning our wheels and continuing to work individually. At this point, there are enough people in the diaspora to, organize a group like that, to fund a group like that, and to fund a staff that'll do the work. Because a lot of the organizations are working with volunteers, and you can't do that kind of instant, response work when you have only volunteers. So that's the call I'd like to encourage us as a community to think about.
That's a wonderful point. Thank you for putting out that call, Carol. Marie, you one more thing.
Is it too late for the dignitary, I want to call her, Miss Barot, to form this this organization that you're talking about? I think that's such a great idea.
Yeah.
But you need to be, you need to have project management skills. You can't just do it. I know I can do it, but since
somebody needs to do it, but I think before, one person volunteers, you need to bring people together to put our heads together.
That's a great idea.
Like a diasporic commission, like, this commission in Haiti, maybe we need one here of all of our organizations. And, somebody evolves as a leader, a spokesperson, but, we do it so that we have that presence. Because that presence is missing.
That's a great idea for all the organizations to still exist, but have one
umbrella.
Umbrella that is the voice of everyone when there's crisis.
Yes.
Genius. Like everyone.
That's why.
I agree with that.
Yeah, Kenny nodding his head. He's trying to get the clergy together in Brooklyn and trying to reach to elected officials. We know there are a ton of there's a national elected officials organization that's trying to do things. These are all organizations that to your point, all need to come together, whether they're called United or not.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, right? L'union fait la force is what our motto is.
That's right.
So we have to take that with us wherever we go across the globe, right? And actually stay united. That's the hard work.
That's the hard work.
And
that's a great idea for another meeting.
Yeah.
Inviting.
We had that in May.
Inviting people who already run not mom and pop shows, or to run organizations to
come together,
talk about their willingness to even do this. Wow.
Okay.
It's a must.
Well, you all have a lot of go ahead, Kenny.
And I think I agree with Carol. I agree with you 100%. And I think we need to have one umbrella. I believe Haitian Time could be one of the, I'm advocate for Haitian Time because he's in the neutral position right now because in our community, the way it works, if I'm not doing it, you're not doing it, it's no good. I have to be the one who's doing it, or you have to be the one who's doing it. That's what's happening right now in our community right now, inside the Haitian clergy, inside the Haitian elected official. We are not together at all.
It's like,
to be honest with you,
put your egos aside and focus on what the real problem is,
To be honest with you,
everybody.
Maybe that's it.
That's it. So, everybody, that's it. I agree.
All right. Well, on that note, I think we'll have to wrap it for the evening because we've been at it for about an hour and a half. This was such a lovely, lively conversation. Thank you for all of you for joining. Despite our technical difficulties in the beginning, we made it. And I have so many takeaways and ideas for follow-up for different stories that we'll pursue, different things that we'll run by you, and just different ideas for future panels. Thank you for supporting the Haitian Times and always being open and available. Thank you for the work you do in the community. So for those who might have missed it, I think our key takeaways revolve around understanding that everyone has their skill set, everybody can help, just get creative to think about what you're comfortable with within your means, right? The second piece is don't forget the root of the problem is really in Haiti. So however we can, keep an eye towards what's going on there and try to help with the capacity building that our brothers and sisters there need. I think the third thing I picked up is really the drive for the legislative work that has to be done at a policy level in Washington, D.C. for immigration policy and the treatment of Haitians here. So whether that's blanket amnesty for everybody, extending TPS, once again, like Marie was saying, we have to make sure that that happens. And the way to do that is by coming together, like Kawal mentioned. Yeah. We have to stop the infighting and, just taking on all these destructive tactics that are keeping us from really evolving into the force that we can be as a diaspora in the US. So these are the key things I took away. Please feel free to share your own and follow our panelists wherever they are. I do have a really sweet note to end on from someone named Fredo Etienne. He's been very patient about telling us that he is hosting 2 virtual baby showers for families who came in with pregnant, and the babies are about to be born. So if you can, what Fuedo and I guess his family is doing is putting together a baby shower registry on Amazon for these families. So please log in and try to contribute whatever you can. Everybody's on Amazon, right?
That's a great idea, Fuedo.
Yeah.
Love it, love it, love it.
And if you're watching this later on YouTube, go on our Facebook page on the Haitian Times, click on the link and send a contribution to these families. Again, thank you all so very much, everybody. Have a wonderful night and we'll do this again soon.
Okay.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Have a good
Thank
night.
you. Bye-bye.